Preston of Resource Maven. I'm here with Chris Taylor. Thanks for taking the time today.
No problem.
And we're sitting in Great Bear's boardroom, and I think this is a pretty cool place to be having this conversation because it was right here 2 years ago, or a little bit less than 2 years ago, that I came for a lunchtime presentation from this company that I'd never heard anything about before.
Right there.
That's right. There was sandwiches, and there was Chris talking about this project that they'd pulled together in Red Lake, the Dixie Project. And it all made sense at the time, tight share structure. Chris and your partner Bob Singh, great geologist, structural geologist in a structural geologic environment. The right sort of backstory, enough drilling that it looked good. And so, you know, I invested in it. I wrote about it in my newsletter. And of course, that has worked out really well.
Yes.
So let's quickly go through sort of how that happened. First of all, you drilled into the areas that you were talking about that day, which were the areas that were sort of known and that are classic Red Lake deposits. So let's talk about those to begin with.
Well, first off, let's not underplay the fact that anybody that listened to your initial recommendation made about a 2,000% return on that initial investment. So, I mean,
so that's been great.
Yeah, that's what we are in the business for, returns for our shareholders. So anyway, kudos to you for being the first to pick up the story.
Thank you.
And you did ask me a technical question, so. Well, it's come a long way since that original Dixie Limb drilling.
Exactly,
and, you know, subsequent to the Dixie Limb, we found the Hinge Zone, which is a typical Red Lake high-grade gold and vein system.
Right.
And more recently now, we're drilling off something which looks like it's completely non-typical for the Red Lake district, this big LP fault target.
Absolutely. So we have Limb, and we had Limb and Hinge.
Yeah.
And like you say, those are classic Red Lake environments. And that doesn't mean that they were easy to figure out. It still took a lot of structural figuring to understand the D2 faulting and the plunges and to track these. But you did, and the market got really excited about that. And now you have some pretty continuous high-grade zones in those two areas.
Correct, and we've drilled them down to about 500 meters depth. I mean, for Red Lake, that's, let's be honest, just scratching the surface. I mean, you're sitting near mines that are down to 2.5 kilometers or more of depth, and they look a lot like ours in terms of grades, widths, the whole bit, right? So Red Lake generally, just for context, I mean, you're looking for, say, 2 meters of 10 grams per ton gold. So something about the width of the boardroom table over there at about 10 grams, that would be money-making rock in every deposit in the area.
Perfect, and that's what you had been finding, and that's why people had gotten really excited about Great Bear.
Correct, yeah.
And then you sort of stepped back and took a look at the bigger picture of the Dixie Project, and various government and other surveys had delineated this really long fault structure that runs the length of the property.
Yeah.
There were some historic looks here and there along there that carried gold or that hadn't been assayed for gold but looked interesting. So you and Bob sort of took a step back, figured this situation out, came up with a theory, and started drilling. So talk a bit about this, which is called the LP fault, and what you're finding there and how it's so different than what we had been talking about at Limb and Hinge.
Well, you know, we can dial it back a little bit more and think that when we first got involved in the Dixie property, the project was only a couple kilometers by, you know, a few kilometers. So it was like a relative postage stamp against what we're looking at right now. So we ended up doing a high-resolution geophysical survey, and that let us see where this big fault structure would go through, and we staked the claims accordingly. So that's why the property is about 22 kilometers tip to tip, because we saw this structure within what we interpreted as the greenstone belts. That turned out being correct. It goes for about that strike length, and it was open ground. At the time.
Just open ground for the taking.
Open ground, and some of the ironies of ironies, within the open ground, there were spots where there was already high-grade visible gold that had been drilled but not assayed by past explorers. So when we began noticing that this target, after our Bear Ramini discovery, which was 750 grams per ton gold over a couple of meters within this target, and beside that, not even including, but right beside that, there was about 14 meters of over 12 grams per ton gold, and beside that, within the fault, there was about 50 meters of about 3/4 of a gram gold. And then we thought, well, what about these other drill holes that have been put along this thing over the years? So we pulled out drill core that had unassayed high-grade visible gold just sitting in it that had been there on surface for more than a decade, and that we called our Yuma discovery. Since then, now it's step outs, and this story is one that is just continuing to grow. It's now, we almost don't know what to say about it anymore. So the scale of it is similar to if you put all the mines in the Red Lake District and put them all beside each other, that's about 23 kilometers long. That's about the same scale as this target that we're looking at right now.
Which in itself is crazy to wrap your head around. But on top of that, the mines in Red Lake are primarily like Hinge and Limb. They're
Correct.
high-grade, narrow,
Correct.
underground operations, whereas along LP, what you're also finding here is disseminated gold with that high grade within it.
It's amazing to think, like, it already has the kinds of grades and widths that have been successfully mined. Those are the backbone grades and widths of mining. It's already done as good or better than what we would have hoped for. And then around that, you get this bracket of wide, lower grade gold mineralization, but it goes right to the surface. You know, like the implications of valuation because of that combination of wide, low grade and containing high grade intervals in the near surface, I can't overstate it really. It's very important for the future of this project.
And the scale here is unreal. So you have this immense strike, potential strike. Right now you have 3 kilometers of that where you've done basically 3 fairly random fences, randomly placed fences. There was some reason to do each, but not dramatic reason.
No.
And you hit gold in every one of those fences. So now you have sort of 3 kilometers of not continuous, but strike where each zone looks exactly the same, empty in between, but it looks the same.
Yep.
That's in the middle of sort of 18 kilometers of potential strike.
Yep.
And the zones that you're hitting are way larger volume-wise than a normal Red Lake zone.
Yep.
It's just crazy.
I know. I'm just going to let you say these things because this is how we feel about it too. Crazy is maybe the only word you can apply sometimes.
And so now I guess the question is, how do you attack all of this? Like, how do you attack 18 kilometers of strike with, I mean, you could put 50 drills on there. Yet then you also have the Limb and Hinge, which we shouldn't shrug at. They're also valuable deposits that still deserve a lot of attention. So how do you, what do you do now?
Well, you know, it's evident that we have increased the number of rigs this year recently. So everything we had done to grow the company from a few $1 million of market cap to well over $100 million of market cap was with 1 drill rig.
Right.
Then, you know, a few months back we added a 2nd rig and then we added a 3rd rig, and the pace of discovery has just been accelerating. So I would say it's a very good bet that there'll be more drill rigs deployed on the project in the near future, and then we can simultaneously continue to step out along this large LP fault target, and we can continue then to follow up on all the hits that we have in the intervening spaces and continue to define the Dixie Limb and the Hinge down to depth and along strike or wherever they're going to go. So this is an incredible combination. Like the news flow that we'll have under that kind of scenario, I mean, the news flow is already better than anybody else in the industry, but the news flow will get to the point where a danger will be that we'll just overwhelm people with gold results coming out.
Too many good things.
Exactly. You know, so that's a risk we're willing to take, obviously. It's been a formula that is working very nicely for our shareholders.
Fair enough. And since you are restricted in a lot of things that you can say, I'm going to say that until this new news came out about LP and, you know, 3 kilometers of step outs and hitting in every one, I was at the point where, okay, Limb and Hinge look fantastic. How much higher can this stock go? Maybe it's time to take profits. We're up 2,000%, you know, and rotate into something else. Is this even going to double from here? Now, Great Bear has a $360 million market cap. If there is anything close to the amount of gold in this immense scale opportunity that just unveiled, you know, if it comes out anything close to what it could be, I mean, Great Bear is going to be worth a lot more than $360 million. So that's just some context for the price, which is hard to wrap your head around when something costs $8, $9. In the junior sector, it's hard to wrap your head around. But the scale that we're looking at here and valuations are the only things that you should pay attention to.
Well, Gwen, to speak to that briefly, I mean, like, nobody inside of Great Bear's board or management has been involved with a story that has this kind of potential before. And that includes guys that have sold some massive projects and made people a lot of money.
Yeah.
And we all sit here shaking our heads and thinking, God, this is really incredible. So if I had, you know, an excess $5 million sitting around today, which I do not because that's all tied up in Great Bear stock, but if I did, I would not hesitate to basically, you don't get an opportunity very much, and I don't think it'll ever happen in my career to be involved with a discovery with this consistency of delivery and the potential scale. So, we spend our lives as geologists trying to understand where we're going to find, a gram per ton gold, or how we're going to try to find a few meters of mineralization. And the scale, it's been off the charts here. And you can take the approach in investing, and I do this with all sorts of different companies with, when I don't have everything absolutely invested in Great Bear. But you can either bet on something that's very, very undervalued but very, very risky, or something that is a winner that you've seen been performing. And this is a decision people have to make according to what they see. Do they think that Great Bear is a unique, very rare discovery, or do they think it's just another single deposit project where it's easy to price in and easy to understand the scope of it? So I would argue that we're onto a district scale discovery here. It's all owned by one company. That's such a rare occurrence. I don't know of a comparable that I can point to. So my money's on Great Bear and our ability to find more on this property.
Well, thanks for the 2-year recap. It's a very exciting story, and we'll probably be back here again shortly, given how much news you're pumping out.
Yeah, thanks very much, Gwen. Always nice to catch up.
Thanks.